Unit 2.
Hi, Lan.
Hello, Nhằm. Do you know if our geography teacher has fixed the date for our presentation on urbanisation?
It's next Friday. It's time we finalise the content. How long should we talk?
Well, it is recommended that the presentation be no more than 15 minutes. There is also a 5-minute Q&A session.
Well, we'd better work together, or we might not prepare well for it.
You're right. I think we should start with the definition of urbanisation and perhaps mention some of its causes, such as lack of resources in rural areas and better work opportunities in urban areas.
I agree. But before we provide the definition, we should show some thought-provoking photos to illustrate urbanisation in our country. Visuals will grab the attention of our audience and keep people engaged.
That's a great idea. I'll start looking for some interesting images. What about the body of our presentation? We have a lot of information.
Yes, there's a lot to say, but I suggest that we focus on its advantages and disadvantages.
I agree. We should also provide some examples.
Yes, this will help listeners to understand our points better.
Our geography teacher also advised that we talk about issues that are familiar and important to our classmates.
So, do you think we should stick to urbanisation in Vietnam?
Well, this should be the main part, as our audience will be very interested in knowing more about it. But we could also mention urbanisation in well-known places, like the UK and USA, where most of the population now lives in urban areas.
Yes, it's important that we talk about how developed countries have solved the urbanisation problems and propose some solutions to those in Vietnam.
That would be interesting, but it would make our presentation too long. We shouldn't overload people with information, or else they'll just switch off. We could instead mention some solutions and government initiatives in the conclusion.
Well, is it really necessary that we include new information in the conclusion? We should just summarise the main points.
Okay, but we still need to do some research on the solutions. People may ask us during the Q&A session.
I agree. So shall we start creating the PowerPoint slides then, and...
They are discussing the outline, structure and content of their presentation on urbanisation next Friday. They will have no more than 15 minutes for their presentation and 5 minutes for QA session. It will include the definition of urbanisation, its causes, and its main advantages and disadvantages. It will also refer to urbanisation in Vietnam, the USA and the UK. No, because that would make their presentation too long and overload listeners with lots of information. No, because we are students, not statisticians. Thus, it's hard for us to know exactly the number of people have moved in or out of our area.
It is recommended that the presentation be no more than 15 minutes. I suggest that we focus on its advantages and disadvantages. Our geography teacher also advised that we talk about issues that are familiar and important to our classmates. It's important that we talk about how developed countries have solved the urbanization problems. Is it really necessary that we include new information in the conclusion?
The impact of increased urbanization has been harmful to the environment and has led to the growth of greenhouse gas emissions. Students can easily overload their short-term memory with unnecessary information. The lecture was hours long and boring, so by the end of it, I completely switched off. Before the Industrial Revolution in England, the majority of the population were employed as agricultural laborers. So the transformation of China into a modern economy started in the 1950s through the process of industrialization.
Many young people in rural areas don't want to spend their lives on the farm like their weather-beaten parents. They understand that there are better long-term job prospects for them in the city. So they leave the home villages to find well-paid jobs in the fast-growing industrial zones. In the city, young people can also have access to up-to-date facilities and technology.
Hi, Mike.
Hello, Joe. I haven't seen you for ages. You look tired.
I've just come back from the city.
Did you take the train?
Yes, but it took 5 hours. The journey was really slow, and it was so noisy and crowded.
Well, trains are still slower than coaches.
Sure. They should replace them with new high-speed trains. Next time, I'll go by coach. And how are you?
Well, life hasn't changed much for me. I still live and work on my farm with my wife. But my sons and daughters have all moved to the city.
So you really like it here in the countryside?
Yes, I do. I keep hearing about all the crimes, noise and pollution in big cities, especially in the industrial zones. My wife is so worried about our children that she calls them almost every day.
They're young, and the city life is more interesting for them. They will also have better career prospects.
Yes, I agree. They have managed to find well-paid jobs and are really enjoying life there.
It is important that he get into a good university. The teacher demanded that the classroom be cleaned immediately. My father insists that my brother work on the farm. It is vital that people be allowed to choose where to live. I requested that everyone in my class attend my presentation. It is crucial that urban people not look down on rural people.
Her parents insisted that she study. should study hard for the GCSE exams. It is essential that young people from rural areas should be told the truth about city life. It is imperative that all migrants should obey the rules and regulations of the residential areas they move to. The police demanded that the stolen money should be returned to the bank. It is a good idea that the police should be searching for the missing people.
Urbanization happened first in more economically developed countries, then in less economically developed countries. Urbanization has increased in rich countries. Since 1950s, lack of resources in rural areas is one of the factors leading to urbanization in less developed countries. That the standard of living in cities and rural areas is more or less the same. By 2050, more than 2/3 of the world's population are expected to live in urban areas.
Urbanization is the process by which urban areas grow bigger as more and more people leave the countryside to live in towns and cities. Before the 1950s, urbanization mainly occurred in more economically developed countries. Rapid urbanization happened during the period of industrialization in Europe and North America in the 19th and early 20th centuries. A lot of people left their home villages for urban areas, hoping to find jobs in the rapidly expanding industries in big towns and cities. Since 1950s, urbanization has become slower in most meds. Now, some of the biggest cities are losing population because people go back to live in rural areas. This is known as counter-urbanization. Since 1950, urbanization has grown rapidly in less economically developed countries in Africa and South America. Between 1950 and 1990, while the urban population in LEDCS doubled, increase was less than half in developed countries. There are various causes of urbanization in LEDCS. Here are some major ones. First, people migrate to urban areas on a massive scale due to lack of resources in rural areas. Second, small farmers find it to make a living, not just because of bad conditions such as drought, floods, or storms, because they can't compete with large agricultural companies. These are considered pushive factors. People living in rural areas are also pulled to cities, which are known to be places of financial centers, services, wealth, and opportunities, believing that standard of living in urban areas will be higher in rural areas. Many people come to the city seeking their fortune. Today, about half of the world's population in urban areas. Urbanization has provided opportunities, higher incomes, and better access to health facilities and education. The urban population will continue to grow, and it is expected that proportion will increase to 70 by 2050.
It's a process by which urban areas grow bigger as more and more people leave the countryside to live in towns and cities. MC stands for more economically developed countries. LAEC stands for less economically developed countries. Before the 1950s, rapid urbanization took place in Europe and North America because it was the period of industrialization in these areas. After 1950, urbanization started to grow rapidly in LAECs. Some of the push factors of urbanization are lack of resources in rural areas, bad weather conditions, and competition from large agricultural companies. Because they have to suffer bad weather conditions and competition from large agricultural companies. Some of the pull factors of urbanization are the centralization of resources such as money, services, wealth, and opportunities, as well as the higher living standards of these areas.
I don't know why so many people are moving from their home villages to big cities these days. They've become so overcrowded.
Yeah, I agree. They're really overpopulated, but lots of people still want to become city dwellers.
Well, I'm quite happy in my home village. It's important that some people stay in rural areas and work in agriculture.
But there are more employment opportunities in the city. Don't you want to get a high-paid job in an office instead of working on parents' farm? Your standard of living will higher in the city.
I'm not sure. Not everyone is lucky. Big cities flooded with people from rural areas. Many of them are jobless and have to live in slums rather live in my village.
You're right. It's essential that the government should build big cities and upgrade the infrastructure in rural areas.
Urbanization rate has been increasing steadily over the past 30 years.
In 2030, nearly 2/3 of the population will live in urban areas. Urban areas become very crowded. A lot of people in the cities are not able to find jobs. Some people have to live in slums with poor sanitation.
Hello everyone. Last week we talked about the causes of urbanization. Today I'll discuss its advantages and disadvantages. Urbanization can bring about a lot of benefits. It can offer people from rural areas not only opportunities for better paid jobs, but also access to schools, hospitals, and other social services. As a result, people's overall standard of living can improve. People in rural areas tend to be more conservative and follow old-fashioned practices like child marriage and gender discrimination. The process of urbanization can actually change their mindset and help them to accept more progressive ideas. However, there are also some obvious disadvantages. High rates of urbanization can contribute to more crime in big cities. Although many people benefit, not all get the opportunity of a good and stable job. Unemployed people are more likely to engage in robbery, kidnapping, murder, and other illegal activities. Another problem caused by urbanization is the shortage of affordable housing in big cities, which can result in growth of slums with no sanitation or drinking water. In addition, urbanization leads to the shift of the working population from agriculture to industries. Labour shortages in rural areas are likely to result in a decrease in agricultural and food production as well. To sum up, urbanization can bring social and health benefits. However, it also has its own drawbacks. I've only discussed some of them. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to raise them and I'll try my best to answer them.
Thanks to the process of urbanization, people from rural areas have access to better paid jobs, education, and health care. After moving to cities, rural people become less conservative. Many people benefit from urbanization, but not everyone has the opportunity to find stable employment. The shortage of accommodation in big cities can result in creation of very poor areas with no sanitation or clean water. The shift of workers from agriculture to industries can lead to a fall in food production. There has been a dramatic rise in the migration of young people to big cities due to shortages of jobs. The population in rural areas has decreased in the last 10 years. There was an increase of over 30 in the urbanization rate in Indonesia from 1969 to 2009. But the rate of urbanization in South Korea rose sharply during the period between 1969 and 1989. There was a slight decrease in the urbanization rate in the city during the economic crisis in 2008.
By 2050, 70% of the world's people will live in cities. Energy, especially oil, will be very expensive. Natural resources are running out due to the excessive exploitation. Many people will probably have their workplaces close to, far from where they live. It will be difficult to provide enough water, gas, and electricity for really big cities. The countryside. Many people from the countryside will move to smaller cities, big cities.
We now live in a small town in Bakjiang. We all think that in 2050, our small town will grow into a small city. More and more people from the nearby villages will come and settle down here. There will be more entertainment centers and better facilities. Several factories will be built in the area, so more jobs will be created for local people. But things will become more expensive especially oil and electricity. Also, the environment may have to suffer. Air and water will be polluted due to the smoke from factory chimneys and not properly treated drainage system. It is important that the government and local authorities work closely to support sustainable development.
As the capital city of Thailand for over 200 years, Bangkok has an important role to play. Its growth is the world's window on the growth of Thailand. Its urbanization rate has increased gradually over the past 50 years, bringing apparent and wide-ranging benefits to the country. These include economic, social, and cultural ones. In terms of economic benefits, the national income statistics have shown that Bangkok and the surrounding areas usually generate more than 50% of the gross domestic product. Regarding the social benefit, Bangkok's inhabitants have access to better services and facilities compared to any other area of the country. Moreover, as a national centre of art and culture, Bangkok provides many opportunities and facilities for leisure and sport activities and entertainment. However, urbanization has also resulted in massive problems. For example, thousands of migrants live in the modern slums surrounded by poverty, crime and drugs, and with no hope of getting a job. Traffic congestion is another big problem in the city, whose road system is unable to cope with the increased number of cars. The traffic congestion, combined with the large concentration of factories, has severely affected the air and water quality. Despite the problems, Bangkok still continues to attract more and more migrants every year. The problems of traffic congestion, pollution and urban slums will continue to grow worse if the government does not take any measures to reduce the negative effects of urbanization.
The growth of Bangkok is the world's window on the growth of Thailand. It has brought about economic, social, and cultural benefits. The drawbacks include the growth of slums, social issues such as drugs and crime, traffic congestion, and environmental pollution.
High crime rate is considered to be the worst effect of urbanization. Industrial zones are developing rapidly in the urban areas. More and more people are migrating to urban areas to look for better job opportunities. The cost of living in big cities has risen dramatically over the past years. This has caused a lot of difficulties for low-income people. The talk was long and overloaded with useless information, so I switched off.
The new law has wide-ranging effects on the migrants. In big cycles, sometimes we can see weather-beaten faces of people migrating from the rural areas. We attended an in-depth and thought-provoking presentation on urbanization and its impact on society. Governments should try to limit the never-ending growth of cities. Poor people in big cities still have to deal with many day-to-day problems, but
girls in our class proposed that our teacher should organize a camping trip in the countryside. Miss Kim recommended that our class should be divided into 6 groups to work on the unit project. Lynn is now living in the city. Her parents are still living in their home village. They insist that Lan should call home every day. It's important that parents should be given their children's academic results at the end of each term. But the local authority demanded that local residents should support new migrants